Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I am your host, Adam Crowers, and tonight we are talking NFC East. We finally made it to the NFC East. Cowboys, Giants, Commanders, Eagles, former NFC champs. Super excited tonight with Mr. Full-Time Fantasy himself, Jody Smith, and the brainchild behind our stuff over here, Shawn Childs. How's everybody doing tonight? Shawn, how are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. Getting ready, pounding through some articles and, doing some minor drafts in the best balls, but getting ready to August 1st when I switch probably to more of the season-long stuff.
Love it. And listen, don't you have an NFC East jersey to wear tonight? It's not the AFC East. You got the Dolphins. You're rocking the Dolphins tonight.
I took the color when I switched to black to try to make it look a little better. I was looking for a green screen, but I couldn't find one today. So, I'm trying to upgrade my, my outlook.
That's right. Jody, how you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, doing well. Shawn's a machine, man. I'm just having trouble keeping up with all the content, he's been sending. But, in addition to that, working on the full-time fantasy draft kit, which should be coming out pretty soon. And my preseason pro, which is pretty much ready. Make some moderately bold calls. But, between that, I got so many drafts going on. You'll probably hear notifications going off here during the show. But it's the happy time of year. So,
it's a beautiful sound. It's a beautiful sound. Speaking of drafts, we got to be out of here at like 9:50 to 9:55 because I am in both 10 o'clock drafts tonight. I'm in the Superflex Bowl at 10 o'clock. I'm in the Circa Fantasy Mid-Stakes draft at 10 o'clock because I'm a maniac. There's still room in both of those, everyone. So jump into those tonight for sure. Draft with me, against me, for me, and we'll make that happen. But since we got to be out of here in less than an hour, let's jump right into it. The Dallas Cowboys. Shawn, talk to me about Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. What are your projections say, my friend?
I got Dak playing 95% of the snaps, almost 4,300 passing yards, 242 rushing yards. Quite as impressive on the ground as it was with 33 combined touchdowns. Realistically, he needs his secondary receivers to play a little bit better. The addition of Cook will be helpful. Veteran receiver, he's had a pretty good career. Last year, he kind of dipped down a little bit, and Gallup needs a bounce back. And Jalen Tolbert really just kind of didn't, contribute too much last year. So hopefully he can at least put his name on the radar. So, with Pollard and maybe the change at tight ends, it should be interesting over there.
Jody, I know you're from the area. What's the word on Dak down there?
Well, don't confuse Dallas and Houston because we have teams getting along here. So you can't really intermingle Texans and Cowboys fans. That's the reason that the Houston Texans had to change their tailgating policy was because one of the times the Cowboy fan came into town and that was compared to just a bad destruction or whatever happened. But as for Dak, my numbers as per usual are actually, pretty close to Shawn's. I think he's actually a, pretty good value at this point. My main concern, I think is going from Kellen Moore to Mike McCarthy as the play caller. That said, Dak, his FFWC ADP, he looks solid to me. I thought last year, he played pretty well. He did throw an NFL high 15 interceptions, but overall, he put up competent fantasy numbers. How Dallas let Kellen Moore, go when they were, first in yards or second or fourth in scoring, whatever it was the last, 3 years. But, McCarthy was, pretty competent as a play caller in Green Bay. Yeah, he got to work with Aaron Rodgers, but I think that they'll instill a West Coast offense, just fine in Dallas, and they've got the personnel now. Like Shawn just said, is Brandon Cook should be a pretty significant upgrade at wide receiver 2 for them. So overall, he's right there as my QB 10, and he's a guy that I've got a lot of shares of simply because he seems to be sliding in drafts, and it's kind of easy to pair him with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, easy to pair him with all the guys there. Prescott going QB 11 right now at the 11-11. Let me make sure I have that right. That ADP right. Yep. So I like Dak. I like the weapons he's got around him. He doesn't have the rushing upside, I don't think, that he used to have, but I think, he might have more weapons than he's ever had. Pass catching running back in Pollard, more explosive. Zeke caught it, but he's not as explosive. Brandon Cooks, like it. CeeDee Lamb, obviously. So I really like that. And, in the past, whenever he got in trouble, he would check down 5-yard out routes to Dalton Schultz with no yak. That's boring. That's not going to get you what you need. You start checking it down to Tony Pollard, he can explode. So I'm definitely on board with him. Speaking of Tony Pollard, Shawn, talk to me about Pollard. Talk to me about that running back position there. Is it gonna change much? What do you see there? Any concerns that he can carry the full load?
I don't think they're going to kind of give him, 300 rushes or anything like that. I have him for 223 with like 51 catches. I still, in the back of my mind, I think Elliott will end up there. And I think with the other 3 running backs, they projected for 140, almost 180 carries. So even if Elliott ended up there, I think that he would maybe get 150 of those, and it really wasn't change Pollard. Pollard's going to probably be the go-to lead guy, and Elliott will kind of get in the way, but if he signs. So Pollard is, pretty explosive player, makes big plays over 5 yards a catch. A rush, and he can make big plays catching the ball. He makes the offense a little bit more exciting, I think, and he definitely helps the passing game. And I think he's a pretty attractive player, and he's fully priced, I think, this year right now in drafts.
Jody, what do you think about? I love Pollard in the mid to, like, if I lose out on that little group of receivers there, the Garrett Wilson, I'm on Ross St. Brown and all that. I don't mind taking a shot on Pollard. I don't think I take him over Saquon though, but we'll get to him next. But are you okay with Pollard in that range?
Sure. If you start a draft off receiver, which all of us, I think, really want to do this year, it's a little bit more difficult than I was expecting. But I think Pollard's a really nice target as an RB1, towards the latter part of round 3. But I'm really glad Shawn brought up, something that I feel like I'm the only one who's been talking about. I remain convinced that Zeke Elliott's going to end up re-signing in Dallas. It just makes so much sense. Jerry Jones loves him. He hasn't attracted any attention anywhere else that we've heard of. All we've seen is videos of him staying in good shape and all that. I think in time, he's still young enough to contribute and be a solid option, in offense. And, part of what makes Pollard so great is that 5.2 yards a carry. He was 7th in the league. He was 3rd in yards after contact per attempt and 3rd in breakaway rate and 15 plus yards. It's that big playability. And you have to wonder if you were to take on something like, 240, 260 carries, would there be a decrease in the efficiency with that added volume? And that's always been a concern for me. Dallas was smart last year. They only gave him 6 carries inside the 5 last year. It wasn't a role that he was real prominent in. He scored twice in that area. Zeke, on the other hand, had 19 carries for 22 yards and 9 touchdowns. So all them punishing, hits that weren't going to go very productive, that, they went to the bigger back there. And right now, Malik Davis is the only back on the roster who could kind of fill that short yardage, bigger back role. Deuce Vaughn kind of makes sense maybe as a satellite player, but he's 5'5", 179 pounds. So he's certainly not going to fill in, in that area. So I think actually the best case scenario for everyone in Dallas would be for Zeke to re-sign, because I think the role they had Tony Pollard in last year is kind of ideal for fantasy and for the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny. We're always like, man, if Pollard could just get the backfield to himself, he'd be insane. He'd be awesome. Now he's got the backfield to himself, and we're like nitpicking, like, I hope it doesn't.
You like to see it, but like I said, I really think the efficiency would probably tail off a little bit. We've seen it happen a lot of times over the years with these big playbacks that come in and take on all those short yardage and all those that punishment. Seems to decrease that big playability that made them so special in the first place.
Of course. All right. Yeah. So he's the running back to talk about there. Moving on to the receivers, CeeDee Lamb's awesome. I don't know if you have him projected higher, Shawn, this year than you did like last year. I know he had a kind of a breakout year last year, so people were concerned. Can he do it? But I think he really showed he's an alpha wide receiver 1. They move him around all over the field. Any concerns about CeeDee Lamb?
No, it really, he's just, like he said, he really kind of proved himself second half of the year. I have him checked at 109 catches, 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns. He definitely, last year he was getting drafted like at the end of the first round, but you kind of we're kind of betting on the come. Well, he produced last year, and now people have a little more confidence in him, and he goes in an attractive area. So he's a foundation receiver, and there's not many receivers in the league that are going to catch 100 balls, and he's one of them that should do it if he stays healthy.
Yeah, perfectly fine taking him. Right after the kind of the big receivers go, like right after Tyreek Hill, that's usually where CeeDee Lamb kind of sneaks in there. You have any issues with that, Jody?
No, he's my wide receiver 6. It just, at that point in the draft, you're talking late part of the first round. It comes down to preference, whether you like him or Diggs or one of the other guys that might be there. What your build is going to be. If you're going to pass on running back, you're going to go receiver. I mean, I have several teams that have started off with Lamb, and like I said, it's easy to stack him with Dak Prescott, and there's no reason to think that the Cowboys, even without Kellen Moore, are going to drop off significantly where they won't be the kind of offense that you want to target in stacks like that.
For sure. Shawn, in your team outlooks, you mentioned that Brandon Cooks offers a much better opportunity for Brandon Cooks in 2023. Is that just quarterback, offense, team kind of chemistry there? He's been on some teams that kind of fallen apart there, Houston and all that. Is that what you're thinking there?
Yeah, he's gained over 1,000 yards multiple years. Last year, he scored 145 fantasy points after missing about a quarter of the season. Playing for Houston, he ranked 49th. I mean, you think the natural progression would put him easily in the top 36 receivers. Really gives Dallas somebody on the opposite of Lamb. He can kind of work the short areas of the field and make some big plays. And he's really kind of a player that surprisingly had so many good years, but for different teams and bounced around. He just hasn't found that long-term home. But he should be a good fit to Dallas because they really need somebody to step up at wide receiver too.
Yeah, for sure. I love his explosiveness. I love having him on a team where he's not the one. I think he's going to be really good for them. I think it'll be a compliment to CeeDee Lamb. How do you see that, Jody?
Oh, same. He's a nice value. FFWC ADP of 78 as wide receiver 38. I think that's his absolute floor in this offense as long as he stays healthy. Keep in mind also CeeDee Lamb was third in the NFL with 71 slot receptions last year. So Cooks is going to be able to go outside, and he's going to be that deep threat for the Dallas that was kind of missing last year, as Michael Gallup was really hobbled his first season back from ACL surgery. So I really like Brandon Cooks. He's a guy that I seem to like every year in fantasy. And even though it was a really tough position last year with terrible quarterback play for Houston, he was, still after he came back and, he was still a moderately useful receiver. So, put him in this offense. And like I said, I think his floor is about where he's being drafted right now.
Michael Gallup going off the board, wide receiver 62. Shawn, you're going to project for 48 catches, 633 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. Obviously, projections are different than rankings. Obviously, wide receiver 62 and 48 catches probably equal out to around the same area there. I don't know if I see much outside of injury. I don't see much upside above that. And Lamb and Cooks, haven't necessarily been injured in their career much. I mean, Cooks has been around a while and he's tiny, but he usually tends to play. Any upside beyond those projections, Shawn, or you think that's kind of where he's going to land in?
If Dallas throws the ball a little bit more, he can squeeze a few more catches out of there. He just, he really struggled last year. He showed more potential, but he tends to be like a guy that's catch rates kind of below like a top receiver, but he can make big plays. So he'll have a really, really good game, disappear for a couple games, have a big game. And, last year he just didn't have those big games and kind of put it all together, like string some games together where you could trust him in the fantasy market. So he's more of a fill-in bye-week type of cover for me. I've had him projected kind of low coming off of last year, but if there's a little positive news and if they, like I said, if they're going to throw the ball a little bit more, he'd be more intriguing as a, maybe a wide receiver 5 for me.
Did you give any? So I know you did. Well, we'll want to tight end, and I'll kind of ask both these questions here. Dalton Schultz leaves. Jake Ferguson, the rookie Schoonmaker. Did you take any targets away from the tight end position and give them to the receivers or the running backs to kind of? Because I don't think Ferguson's or whoever the tight end is there, the number one, is going to get the looks that Schultz got. Does that help Gallup? Who else does that help?
Last year, their tight ends caught 25% of the completions. The running back 17% and the wide receivers 15%. I bumped up the running backs up to 20%, downgraded the tight ends down to 19%, and so the wide receivers got a little bit more. So, Pollard being in the backfield got some, and the wide receivers, And that, that could be the tight ends. I still could be over projecting a little bit. The 2 previous years, it was 18 and 22% for the tight end. So, it's not that far in the range. I'm kind of above the bottom part of it. So, I think the key is if Pollard catches the ball a lot, it's going to maybe, move the chains more and probably create more passing attempts, and which probably will help the wide receivers a little bit more too.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking like schematically, why throw a 5-yard check down out route to the tight end like I kept doing last year to Schultz when you can throw it to Tony Pollard, or you can throw it to even like a Brandon Cooks. I think on the video I saw, one of these training camp highlight videos, Cooks just ran a little 5-yard out route and caught it. And it's like, oh yeah, why throw it to this slow cement-footed tight end when you can throw it to an electric playmaker here? But Jody, anything else to add to the tight ends? I mean, Shawn's got Ferguson for 40 catches and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he sounds like a injury or bye week fill-in, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably projected to lead them in targets this group, but I expect that they'll kind of rotate him here. It's just funny, when you become a projections person every summer, how Shawn throws out these totals, and it's funny how mine match up, because I'm looking at, as a group, I have the Dallas tight ends at around 18% target share, so that's spot on for the history of what Shawn just mentioned. But the key thing for me, when you look at Mike McCarthy's history in Green Bay, was that I believe the Packers throughout his tenure were second in the NFL in first down passing, and Dallas tended to run the ball a lot more under Kellen Moore on first down. So maybe that sets the template for more overall passing for the offense. We're not sure. And, like I said, until we know for sure if Zeke's coming back, I think, hesitation at tight end is probably a safe play. And, Michael Gallup, again, he's down around, wide receiver 70 range for me. I think there's nowhere to go up from him. We know how players tend to be better in their second year back from ACL surgery. Hey, you know what, with a different offense and with Brandon Cooks maybe taking away a little bit more coverage, maybe he ends up being a little bit of a value. But spot on, Shawn. I don't have him as anything more than a wide receiver 5 or 6 at best, and he's not someone that I'm going out of my way to. I'd rather at that point in the draft, I'd rather take a chance on upside than somebody whose ceiling isn't very high.
Yep, I get it. Awesome. So that wraps up for the Cowboys. Moving on to the Giants of New York, the New York Football Giants. But before we do, again, don't forget tonight. Drafting at 10 o'clock. I'm double dipping tonight. Superflex Bowl and the Circle Las Vegas Fantasy Championship online tonight at 10 o'clock. There's room in both of those. Join me tonight. As soon as I get off of here, I'll be double dipping. That'll be fun. All right, moving on to the Giants. Daniel Jones gets paid. Shawn, can he finish QB1, like not the overall QB1, but as a QB1, top 12 guy like he did last year? Where do your projections tell you?
He's a little below because there's a few other quarterbacks that had down seasons, and hopefully they have bounced back, but he's in that range. I think the key to him is that he's got the rushing ability that it's a lot higher than we expected, and he scores touchdowns. So he's got a pretty good floor. It's just, can he get a little bit more out of the wide receiver? Jalen Hyatt, the big play receiver from Tennessee, is pretty going to be helpful. Paris Campbell, helpful. And they got other receivers to kind of mix in, and everybody, the roles of everybody looks undefined right now. But the key is, can he make big plays in his career? I think he's 6.8 yards per completion all 4 years in the NFL. Can he get that to like 7.5? Can he throw 525 pass attempts? I think, Hyatt definitely helps that. Adding Waller at tight end improves that area of the game, and they should move the chains, and Barkley's pretty explosive. So he has the talent and really kind of improved on, limiting the turnovers last year. And he was really he threw the ball pretty good in some games when they let him throw it. They're sneaky. That offense will throw it if they want to stop the run. So I really liked him a couple times, especially against Minnesota last year.
Yeah, Daboll is a stud coach. He's a stud offensive coordinator. And Daniel Jones has that sneaky athleticism. The only way he gets in that QB 12 or QB, top 12 quarterback range is if he can repeat with that running for sure. They add Darren Waller to help him out, so we'll see there. But again, the receiving core they just keep adding 19 slot receivers. I don't think I'm super high on Daniel Jones. If I wait, it's going to be a different quarterback, maybe a little bit later, or usually I'm taking in one of the top 5 guys. But moving on to Saquon Barkley. Nice to see that he signed, a 1-year deal for like $1 million more than he would have gotten if he would have signed with them earlier. But Saquon Barkley back in the fold, going at the 1-2 turn. I saw him in a draft slip to the mid-3rd round before that signing, which was crazy. But Jody, where are you with Saquon? Shawn's got him for 294 attempts. He's got him for 58 catches and 15 total touchdowns. Where do you got him?
A little bit less. I've got him at 1,200 rushing yards, 51 receptions, and 11.5 total touchdowns. Still, he comes in at RB5. So, I mean, that's about where you're seeing him in most projections and all that. I feel a little better now, obviously, with the contract situation resolved. You like his usage last year because he had his most receptions since he had during his rookie season. So as long as he stays healthy, I have no problems targeting him at the 1-2 turn where he's currently going. And like I said, he's RB5. So I figure that's about right, even if Shawn's numbers are a little bit more generous to him overall.
Yeah, no, I think he's excellent. Shawn, that 14 rushing touchdowns, is that a projection based on some coming away from Daniel Jones that he had last season?
I just think they're going to score a lot on the ground. They're going to run the ball, close to 500 times. Jones is going to steal some. I have him down for 5. I have him down for 22 touchdowns, and even the couple of backup running backs. I just think their offensive line is improving. They're going to be pretty good and close. I like the depth of their receivers. They're going to move the ball and be a little more explosive. So I think they're going to score a little bit more this year. And so it's an interesting offense. And Jones is more of a upside QB2 that can. I think there was only last year he had 3 games where he scored 30 fantasy points or more, and there was only like 4 other quarterbacks in the league that did that. So Jones can produce at times.
And one thing I forgot to point out, Adam, was that using full-time fantasy strength of schedule tool, the Giants do play the 28th ranked schedule for running backs this year, so it's a little tough sledding. And maybe one minor concern with Barkley is he's kind of battled injuries throughout his career, and now that he's kind of once again playing on a 1-year contract deal, is he going to be playing through these potential nagging injuries, or is he going to play it safe one to hit the market in the off season? But overall, you can't really concern yourself with that kind of thing. So, like I said, I feel pretty comfortable with where he is right now.
Yeah, Saquon's a stud. I love another year coming off the injury. I know you can't include this in your projections. The only thing I can't get out of my head is like he's a guy that's been like nicked. I don't want to say nicked up. His injuries are usually pretty significant. He was unlucky with the high ankle sprain a couple of years ago, obviously the ACL. But like, I feel like after having a really kind of healthy year last year, I almost wonder, is he due to miss a couple of games, which is fine because a lot of running backs are going to miss games as long as he doesn't have a significant injury. And he has no significant competition there. Eric Gray, Breida, Brightwell, probably his biggest competition is Daniel Jones down inside the 5 there. You just hope that Jones doesn't keep it and try to show off. But yeah, Barkley's a stud. More than happy to take him. And again, a guy that is going in the early to mid-second round in a year where receivers are going so early. Barkley, going as like RB4, RB5 in years past would have been pick 6, pick 7. Now you can get him at pick 13, 14, 15, is sometimes as low as the end of the second. So I think he's a great pick. But yeah, moving on to the receivers, some not so great picks over here. I mean, what do we do with these, Shawn? I mean, Jalen Hyatt, a guy I love coming out of Tennessee. I think he's got some great raw talent. The Biletnikoff Award winner in Tennessee there had if anyone wants to see a dominant, humbling performance, go watch Jalen Hyatt against Alabama last year. It was absolutely sensational. Embarrassed all those D1 players. Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Wandale Hodgins. I mean, I don't want to go through all their stats, obviously, but you got them all around 46, 41, 48 catches. I mean, nothing to see here, right? We just don't know much yet.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of the flavor of the week, and then probably wait for some of them players to have defined roles. I mean, Campbell has talent. I mean, he thought he would be a better player. He kind of came on a little bit last year after struggling early. Hodgins, really kind of played pretty well late in the year after, I think he was with the Bills and really didn't get much of a chance, but he's the guy that has the size that, maybe can score in close. Hyatt, big play. Slayton's kind of floated around and been a decent player and, had a couple decent years. But, I think Hyatt's the guy that kind of, pushes him off that role. And then, he's more explosive and can, threaten the defense more. So it'll be interesting to see if they can really push the envelope in the passing game this year. But they most likely will be divided up between a lot of guys.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a team where, like, if you want to get crazy and like stack a team, like a cheap stack, you can grab Daniel Jones late and you can grab like 2 or 3 of these guys late. I would probably grab, Jalen Hyatt, just because, again, I think he's got such potential as a rookie, that deep speed. Daboll drafted him, and so Daboll is going to have a plan for him for sure. He would be one of the guys that I would grab in there. And then you just take another one, just kind of throw a dart at this point in the off season, and you'll have 2 of them with Daniel Jones. You'll have a piece of that passing game. For sure. The team just signed James Robinson too. I forgot to mention that. Not so sure he'll have a weekly role, but we'll see. Moving on, tight end Darren Waller. He's probably wide receiver 1 on this team, right? I mean, he's an absolute stud. He's built like a wide receiver for sure. Shawn, you have Darren Waller for 81 catches. I'm sorry, I lied. 64 catches, 5 touchdowns. Is this a guy that you project to play a full season? I know he's been banged up a lot. He's not as young as we think. He's in his 30s already. 758 yards receiving. What are your thoughts on Waller?
Yeah, I think he's when he's on the field, he's going to be a good player. Like you said, he's most likely going to be the top target on a team, but their team's not going to throw the ball 600 times, probably closer to 500. So his opportunity probably is 20% lower than some of the best teams. Even when he was with the Raiders, they were throwing closer to 600 passes. So he just needs to stay on the field like after missing some time the last couple of years. And he definitely helps out the Giants, especially inside the red zone and moving the ball. So he's a steady player. I don't think he's going to have had the 90 catch ceiling he had before, but he's a guy that's when you're cheating tight end a little bit and you get in that mid range, he kind of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, Jody. He's a guy that I have kind of at the end of my like second tier of tight ends, or I guess down there with Dallas Goedert and all those guys. He's like the last guy going based on ADP. Before I'm kind of waiting on tight end. Is that kind of how you view Waller, or do you have maybe a little bit higher?
I'll probably have him a little higher in that tier. I actually have him as my tight end 5 for the season, 61 receptions, 794 yards, and right at around 5 touchdowns. I do project him to lead the Giants in targets, receptions, yards, pretty much the whole deal. It's just a very hard receiving core right now to handicap. Isaiah Hodgins, like Shawn said, is probably the best bet overall, but all these guys have such deflated ADPs that Paris Campbell probably will be the slot receiver, but they're going to mix in Wanda Robinson. They're going to mix in Jalen Hyatt. They might mix in Cole Beasley. And if they go ahead, why not sign Josh Gordon, Mohamed Sanu, Alshon Jeffrey? I mean, he'll just sign whoever over there. I think they already have brought them in. I don't even know what's going on over there, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll start having a little more clarity. But right now it's pretty easy to load up on them. But again, with the full-time fantasy strength of schedule, the Giants do play the most difficult tight end schedule. That said, sheer volume in this offense, in the way that you look at the way Brian Daboll's offense is targeted, actively involve their tight ends in the red zone. That's probably a role that I think Waller can stand out at.
For sure. I mean, when he was in Buffalo, Dawson Knox had more touchdown catches than he probably deserved based on his getting open numbers and based on his targets and catches. So I think Waller can certainly smash that in the touchdown department. I like Waller kind of down there in the Dallas Goedert range, kind of before we're moving on. But yeah. So speaking of moving on, we'll move on to the Philadelphia Eagles here, the former NFC champs. Jalen Hurts is going as QB1 in a lot of these drafts. Rushing upside, obviously, passing upside. You couldn't ask for a better team around you. Elite weapons, elite offensive line. DeAndre Swift there now. Shawn, talk to me about Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, he's just kind of a beast. And if he could play all 17 games, he missed 2 games in the back-to-back years. So if he could play 17 games and if he can throw like he did last year and really kind of push the envelope, even include the tight end a little bit more. I mean, he definitely can, get close. He's going to get over 5,000 combined yards. I mean, I have him for almost 5,200 combined yards. That's pretty impressive season with 37 touchdowns. I mean, he's up there with the big boys, and he's got the offense. And, this many times last year, he just goes back to throw, and he's got all day, He's got two big play receivers and tight end, and then they can run the ball pretty good. It should be an interesting, I think, season for them, especially if they can include Swift in the, moving the change and throw the ball a little more to the running back. He just needs to stay healthy and be a little more active. I think last year the running backs only had 48 catches, but they had 74 the year before. So hopefully they can squeeze a little more to Swift.
Yeah, no, he's got some great weapons around him. It doesn't matter who he throws to. Like you said, Swift can catch the ball. And the thing about Jalen Hurts is, like, I like him way more in redraft than I do in dynasty, and that's because I feel like this is the peak for Hurts as far as talent around him. Elite O-line, elite running back. Well, not I want to say elite. Swift is an elite running back, but a pass-catching running back. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Those guys eventually are going to want to get paid. Brown's been paid. Devonta Smith. I mean, Dallas Goedert. This might be. This is like Joe Burrow with the Bengals. I mean, that we talked about. Like, it's not going to get better than this probably for the rest of their career. So you really got to capitalize on that for sure. Love Hurts. He's a stud. Jody, DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, mixed. Some people think Swift isn't that good of a running back. We've heard he struggles in the run game. The Lions didn't really like him. The coaches didn't like him over there. Where do you fall on Swift and Penny? Do you like them both? Do you like waiting and taking Penny? What's your deal there?
I like them both where they're currently being targeted, but DeAndre Swift might be actually one of my favorite backs to target in all of fantasy this year. And to me, it's just he has that immense big playability. This is a really, really smart coaching staff. Nick Sirianni, Brian Johnson, these guys know how to ride an offense. I mean, look, they were third in yards last year, third in points. There's that narrative that the Eagles were one of the lowest when it came to targeting their running backs, but I think that's going to change in a hurry. This is an offense, like I said, that they will manufacture targets for DeAndre Swift. They didn't trade for him for nothing. And, with Swift, you're talking about the guy that's sixth in breakaway rate, fifth in yards per route run. And when you look at he's battled injuries a little bit, but in Shawn's profile, Shawn thinks that Swift is probably going to be good at around 10 touches a game. And you know what? That turns out to be 170 touches a season, which, in Swift's 3 seasons, his first year, he posted in fantasy, I'm talking fantasy points per game. He was RB 18 with 160 touches. His second year, he was RB 10 in points per game with 213 touches. That's probably a bit on the high side. And even last season, he was around 147 touches, and he was again RB 17. So you're talking 3 seasons in a row in fantasy points per game. He has been easily inside the top 20, and you see where he's being drafted now is actually quite a bit lower than that. So, and this offense with this coaching staff, even splitting carries with Rashad Penny, that's not a detriment to me. I think Swift is a fantastic value, and to me, I wouldn't be shocked for him to end the season as a RB1 in PPR scoring.
Jody, RB 24 off the board to kind of prove your point there in these circa fantasy championship.
He's already, if you look at it from a points per game standpoint, yes, he's already being drafted after his ceiling,
yes,
after his floor.
And you mentioned 213 touches. I mean, listen, the backup running back there, or the 1B or the 1A, whatever, is Rashad Penny. Death, taxes, and Rashad Penny getting hurt. Those are the 3 things like you can lock in. I mean, Penny's going to get hurt. He's not playing 17 games. I mean, again, they have a lot of depth there at running back also. So
it's really easy to handcuff both of them. At this point too.
Sure. Shawn, what role do you see Rashad Penny having? Do you see him being the early down grinder? Do you see him being more than that? You see him being the goal line back? I think the goal line back is Jalen Hurts. I think they learned that in the playoffs. All those half-yard touchdown runs he had, compliments of the running back pushing him into the end zone. What do you think about Penny?
Yeah, Penny, they're not going to wear him out. They'd like to keep him healthy all season, and they want to get Penny. Sorry, I'm getting confused there. So Penny wants to be the grinder back, and then Swift is going to be the complimentary big, come off the bench and be the third down receiver. So Penny, he's missed 40 games over the last 5 seasons. It's, but when he's on the field and he's had chances to do stuff, he's had some big games and some impressive stretches. It's just a matter of, can he stay for, play 12 to 15 games in a year. So I think that I always liked him as a player, but he's always, disappointed as far as staying healthy. So I think he's a fit, and I think he'll get a chance as long as he's on the field. He's going to probably be productive, but he's not going to get catch too many passes.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when they got the receivers, the tight ends there. I mean, the team is just absolutely loaded. There's no need to get him involved in the passing game for sure. Yeah, and Kenny Gainwell there. I mean, Scott, like there's a lot. Like that's the thing. Like if one running back goes down, I think they really like Gainwell. I say that, but then it's like, well, they added 2 other running backs that were maybe better than even Miles Sanders. So yeah, I think we'll see about that for sure. But yeah, moving on to this receiving core, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. I mean, what more could you ask for? Shawn, I think Devonta Smith, 25% target share maybe last year. Did you have him around that this season when you were doing your projections?
I have 95 catches, 1,245 yards. Last year, he caught a few more balls close to the line of scrimmage. I think he'll make a few more big plays this year. Brown's obviously, been kind of a little more explosive guy, but he's been physical and he scored touchdowns. It's really, when you look at the prop market, even last year, I think they had Brown down for like 6.5 touchdowns and for the season. And I think this year it's not much higher. I'm like, this guy scores touchdowns. It seems mispriced. But Brown's the big play scoring guy, and Smith is kind of worked the short area of the field, and he has the talent to really make some tough catches deep downfield, and he can beat a defense deep. So I think he's the guy that could be interesting to see if he can push, instead of a low yards per catch, maybe get to like 13 or 14 this year.
I want everyone to hear this right now. Devonta Smith might be a better receiver than AJ Brown. I mean, let's just say it out. The guy he's always been a blue chip prospect, stud in college, comes out rookie year awesome, second year awesome. I mean, higher draft capital doesn't really matter at this point, but it just goes to show you he's always been a stud. He still continues to be a stud. I think he has a chance to be the 1A this year in Philly. Wide receiver 9 overall last year, being drafted as wide receiver 13 in the mid to late second round. Shawn, how do you feel about that? Do you have him closer to wide receiver 9 or wide receiver 13?
He right now is such a competitive competition. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I kind of threw you off with that question.
He is right now. Smith, I have at 12, which but
kind of in the middle.
The only person I probably have, Olave is a guy that's kind of gets drafted ahead of him, and I'm like, there's no way Olave should be getting drafted ahead of him. Olave has to prove he can score touchdowns. I think he's the offense with Carr and stuff. So I mean, there's a couple of receivers, even Ridley, I think should go right in that area. So, but he's it's an interesting dilemma there, but Smith's a pretty impressive guy.
Shawn loves the Jags offense, everyone. He's going to take any opportunity he can to promote that Jags offense. He's going to do it. I love it. Jody, what is your thoughts on the 2 big receivers there in Philly?
Yep. I love where Shawn was going with. I was nodding along to it because he's exactly right. Smith was 77th at 9.9 yards per route run last year. He dropped from 14.5 yards per catch his rookie season down to 12.6 last year. I think the presence of DeAndre Swift will kind of alleviate that, and he'll use him, on more deeper plays. And I think he'll jump up, back north of 13, maybe even 14 yards per catch. I think he's being fairly drafted in that range. I kind of would be a little bit interested in getting some of Chris Olave and maybe DK Metcalf, who are kind of going in that same range, but it would certainly, having a part of this Philly offense, either receiver, it's kind of the same territory there. So, I definitely I'm interested in both.
Yeah, no, I think it's a super expensive stack, and it's hard to get all 3. It's really tough to do, to get Brown, Smith, and Jalen Hurts. But hey, listen, it's expensive, but they're gonna score a ton of. It's safe. They're gonna score a ton of fantasy points. You're gonna dominate.
First 3 picks, the ultimate Eagle stack. That's interesting.
That's right. right?
Didn't you say you were doing in that auction? You
All
discussed earlier offline. You were going to get Swift, the 2 receivers, and Hurts. Is that what you said?
Oh no! Don't be giving my auction secrets.
Oh, sorry.
And hey, it's Superflex. It's easier to do that too. By the way, to get all those guys. But yeah, listen, we know the receivers are great. It's going to be a funnel there. Shawn, any like Quez, Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus, Greg Ward, nothing to see there, right? It's just Brown and Smith.
Yeah, Watkins a once in a while pop in with a big play or something.
Yeah.
As long as they stay healthy. I mean, a lot of these players, I mean, when you're projecting them, it's them staying healthy. If somebody gets hurt and they pick up, a few more catches than you expect, but it'll definitely hurt this offense if one of their top 2 receivers get hurt.
Well, listen, if Brown or Smith get hurt, it's probably going to do very well for tight end Dallas Goedert, who you have projected for 69 catches, 886 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's a big season from the Philly to tight end. Talk to me about Goddard. Is this pretty much on? Again, another guy like a Tony Pollard we're talking about earlier. Like, man, if Zach Ertz could just leave, Pollard would eat, and Pollard has eaten there in Philly. I wish there weren't so many weapons for him to compete with. It's hard as a tight end when you're the third, maybe even the 4th option behind Swift in the passing game. But Goddard, bet on talent, bet on offense. What do you think about Goddard, Shawn?
Yeah, when you look at his stats the last few years, people are just, they'll look at what his final numbers are, but he missed games in 2 seasons. Over his last 38 starts, he only averaged 5.5 targets, not too high. But last year on pace for 78 catches, 995 yards and 4 touchdowns. So the only missing link for him, I think, is, can he up his touchdown total and can he stay healthy for the whole season? If he does that, he is going to, be in that top 5 or 6 tight end range, and he's in the right offense. He's probably going to get more chances to score. And I could see him pop 1 year in touchdowns. Even if he got to like 8 or 9 range, it would be pretty good because Ertz had some really impressive years, for them earlier, high catch rate, but he didn't have the same front receivers either there. But so I'm pretty much in that range of, if I'm doing like those best ball drafts, like Kittle looks like a value. And then, I'm taking him right there and kind of flip-flopping those two if I'm, in that mid-range.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, got it, awesome. Again, the cheapest weapon here to kind of stack with Hurts if you can't get the AJ Brown and Devonta Smith thing going there. But Goddard, absolute stud. Like him in that range. Yeah, love all these Eagles players. Moving on to the Commanders, but before we move on, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is I'm drafting tonight, and I'm drafting in the Circa Las Vegas Fantasy Championship because that baby is full. So that thing's kicking off at 10 o'clock tonight. Super excited for that. Superflex Fantasy, the Superflex Championship, Superflex Bowl, is not full yet. So you can still get in that and draft with me tonight as I try to do 2 drafts and talk to my family all at the same time here in Greece, New York. But moving on to the Commanders, Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett. So I was talking with my deep end co-host last night, Mike Shope, about there's no really quarterback controversies this season in the NFL. Like, everything seems kind of clean. The rookie quarterbacks probably have the starting jobs. This might be the closest thing. I know they say Sam Howell is going to be the guy, but Brissett was pretty good last year. Brissett's a veteran. If Howell looks like he can't cut it, Brissett could fill in here. Talk to me, Shawn. Did you factor that in when doing your projections for Howell?
I know I like Howell a lot, and I think that he can do the job. I mean, obviously, if he struggles and they don't win games, I mean, they got a pretty good defense. They want to run the ball, but Howell, kind of showed a little spark last year. And he's going to have some growing pains out of the gate, but I think they're committed to developing him, and has some passing weapons. Maybe the tight end's a little weak, but it'll be interesting to see if he can push to be a league average quarterback, which I probably have him projected higher than most in that area. More so, a lot of these times when they're projected, it's based on, do they have the receiving core and stuff like that. And even the running backs project to get more catches this year with a change of offensive coordinator. Yes.
Speaking of offensive coordinator, the arrival of Eric Bieniemy should mean a lot more to the Washington running backs. Break down in your projections Antonio Gibson versus Brian Robinson. How do you, like me, I personally think, and we'll get to you, Jody, after Shawn answers here. I think Gibson could be a big winner here, a versatile back, a speed back, can catch the ball kind of like they had for the Chiefs when he was in Kansas City. Break that down for us, Shawn.
Yeah, I kind of got last year. I was really like Gibson, and Robinson would kind of, not really some plan him, but he, after he had the leg injury after the shooting and stuff like that, Robinson came on and was pretty impressive. They really fed him the ball. So Gibson's kind of, takes that more of that, the secondary carries on early downs. He's going to pass catch your back, and he probably has, more upside in that area where he can fill that McKissick role. Just you don't know if Howell is going to throw the ball as much to the running back position. Going into this year, I have the running backs catching 20% of their completions. Last year was 26%. The year before that was 29 and 31%. So they have in the past run a lot of balls to the running back position, especially when they're trailing. So I could have that, especially Gibson, under projected for that. I have him 45 catches, 330 yards. Really showed a lot in college in that area, and he can catch the ball. So Robinson, early down runner, is going to score some touchdowns, and he will catch some passes, maybe one a game. But just a pretty good complementary pair there.
Yeah, I think a little thunder, a little lightning there. Robinson did look much better in the second half of the season once he kind of was getting over that injury that he had from the shooting. Jody, where do you got this backfield kind of settling in?
I think they're actually both, pretty good targets at this point. You look at what Eric Bieniemy liked to do in Kansas City. They ran a lot of two-back zone scheme stuff, and that actually should, get both backs on a field, pretty regularly, which would be, really interesting. You don't see a lot of teams doing that anymore. When that happens and they run this zone offense, Brian Robinson was, he's better as a zone runner. He's better in yards after contact. He's more elusive. He's more powerful. He's built like that. And I think he's certainly going to be the main runner. But, again, he only had 12 targets last season. It's not something that, they have asked him to do a lot. So that's where Gibson obviously fits the bill. He was RB 28 in fantasy points per game last season, thanks in large part to ranking 13th in targets. I think both of them, Robinson, FFWC ADP is RB 32, and Gibson is going even later as RB 40. I think they're both probably pretty good values. Overall, I find myself more interested in Gibson because of the pass catching upside, and he's probably going to end up outscoring Robinson. But that said, I think Robinson has the potential to be 1,000-yard rusher and probably will lead the team in touchdown carries.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think both of them are going to kind of be capped unless you get an injury to the other one. I think if Robinson goes down, Gibson can take more over that rushing role. I don't think Brian Robinson's taking a passing role from Gibson, so I lean Gibson. He's the cheaper guy. Keep an eye for Chris Rodriguez. I know the coaching staff really likes him there. Keep an eye on him as maybe like a late last pick type of handcuff in an offense where we don't know about Eric Bieniemy yet. He was under the tutelage of Andy Reid over there. Maybe he is as good as Andy Reid says he is. Moving on to the receivers here, Terry McLaurin, kind of the alpha guy there, former Ohio State receiver. Shawn, you have him for 79 catches, 1,086 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I think that's fine. He's a guy that I have been taking in the mid rounds. In there with the receivers, he goes in like the 4th, 5th round. Wide receiver 23 right now at the 404 of a draft format that I'm going to be doing tonight, the Circa Fantasy Championships. Shawn, what do you think about these receivers, and do you see him taking a leap?
He hasn't played with great quarterbacks in his career, he's still playing with a rookie quarterback, unproven, but showed he still consistently plays well. I think he's just I think he's a trusted asset. 80 catches, 1,000 yards, gets 6 or 7 touchdowns. He is what he is. On a side note, I know that I'll skip to Curtis Samuel. When I was doing the projections, I know that most people kind of overlook him. And a couple of years ago, he scored over 200 fantasy points. But when I was doing the running back catches, I actually stole some of the running back catches and figured Samuel would be that guy. So if Gibson has an injury, Samuel might kind of slide into that role, and he's run the ball in the past. So that's what that's what I was thinking when I was doing it. So I maybe gave him like a third of the catches at running back in the wide receiver catches. So he's an interesting player, and he's talented. So but he does get overlooked in a lot of drafts, and he does have a history of being injured. So if he can stay healthy, he's kind of a wild card for me. Obviously, Dotson's a pretty impressive player.
That's a great point, Shawn. I mean, Cordarrelle Patterson, a late career breakout in that type of role. They're talking like, again, it's early in training camp, stuff always happens, but Laviska Shenault's been running a lot at running back for them, at receiving back for them. in Carolina. So I think they should do that with Curtis Samuel. He's their third receiver. Like, make him your pass catching. I mean, I don't want that for Gibson, but I'm saying, like, it makes sense. Get him involved. You can break the huddle with different schemes, different formations, and the teams, you can confuse a defense a little bit too. But yeah, I like Terry McLaurin. Anything to add, Jody, for Terry McLaurin? Are you higher on Dotson than Shawn? Shawn's got him for 60 catches. 852 yards and 6 touchdowns, less catches, but the same amount of touchdowns as Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, if McLaurin can put up 77, 1191, and 5 touchdowns with Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke throwing targets, at wide receiver 16 last year with that at quarterback, he should be just fine.
With that.
Keep in mind, in that Week 18 game that Howell started last year, Terry McLaurin led the team with 6 targets. He caught Howell's only touchdown pass, so I think he'll be just fine. Dotson's a guy I'm really, really interested in. He was wide receiver 44 in fantasy points per game last season. Keep in mind, of course, he missed 5 games with a hamstring injury, but when he returned, his usage down the stretch was really makes me optimistic towards him. From weeks 13 through 18, he averaged 7 targets and 69 yards per game. It actually ended up being 14.6 PPR points per game. That's the equivalent to wide receiver 20 last year in scoring. So I think Dotson is actually a pretty good value. And Shawn was just hitting on Curtis Samuel. Samuel was one of my favorite guys last year. He finished wide receiver 46 in fantasy points per game. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, I expect the passing volume probably will go down a little bit for them. But yeah, if Antonio Gibson is hurt or that's not working out too well, then Samuel can benefit big time there.
Yeah, it's similar. Another Ohio State guy. Another guy that's
still a value even after last year.
Yeah, I mean, talent in this receiving corps for sure. They just need the quarterback to get these guys the ball. Samuel's a guy that I just never draft. He's talented, and when are you going to start? Like, depending on where you're going to draft him as like your wide receiver 6. So you're not just going to start him. And then if he has a hot game, you put him in, and he doesn't do anything for 2 games. It's just and then he's going to get hurt because he's just a guy that I end up. I see the talent. Quarterback position is really tough there. So I just don't see the upside with Samuel unless he does, like you said, Shawn, get some of those running back carries and some of that receiving work out of the backfield. Another injury plagued guy, Logan Thomas, John Bates here. This receiving core is a mess, this tight end core is a mess, which is good for the receivers and the running backs there. And it's going to be interesting to see. Bieniemy doesn't have the all-time tight end 1 in his offense anymore. So let's see what he does with Logan Thomas. And Bates, you've got him projected for 44 catches for 431 yards. Not much for Bates, 18 catches. This is kind of another tight end position to avoid, right?
Yeah, it's just Thomas, spiked a couple of years ago, coming off an injury. It just isn't, we're just not firing. It's just not even, trusted him. I guess if he surprised early and the change in offensive coordinator got him more balls, it might be help. But I don't see him being fantasy viable, at least out of the gate.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a position where, like, I'm glad they don't have much there, because then the rest of it can go to everybody else for sure. And that's always good. It's always good to have those condensed kind of passing trees. Jody, anything to talk about the tight end position there? Or are you kind of on the same page?
I've got Thomas at a 16% target share, which sounds good, but he still comes in as my tight end 25. So he's not somebody that's really going to be all that relevant.
Yep. And plus he's injury prone, like we said, most of the time. But awesome. Well done tonight, men. That'll do it for our first NFC division preview, the NFC East. Thanks for getting through this with me in 53 minutes. I'm going to be able to get out of here and get my draft in. Still some room left in the super flex. If you guys want to jump in, come on, let's go. We just talked about the NFC East. We can build some stacks together.
Yeah, now you know my whole objective of trying to get all them Giants receivers.
That's right. I was going to say,
I get one of them right.
That's right. We could stack the Eagles. Shawn can draft his Jaguars. We'll be good to go. You know what I'm saying? So awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys. Next week, what do we got? What are we doing? NFC what?
We'll go to the North next week.
Let's go to the North. NFC North. We'll see who the king of the North is. But again, great show. We will see you guys next week. You'll see me tomorrow. You'll get a little. We'll tweet that out a little bit with Beat Kate. We'll go on there and we'll do some drafting and Super Flex Bowl live here on this show. tomorrow night. So tune in for that. Where Kate's doing her drafting. I'm excited. And I'll probably draft after that too, because I'm a lunatic. But anyways, for Shawn, for Jody and myself, thank you for joining the podcast, and we will see you